Joining me now, former Labour official Richard Power Sayeed. Richard, good afternoon to you. I mean, embarrassment hardly covers this one, does it?
Very disappointing, to be honest. I think it kind of depends on a lot of detail that we won't know for years, quite frankly. Saying we don't know how much it's going to cost, we don't know what the fiscal situation is going to be, but the ambitions are still the same is one thing. We just won't know how it's gonna fall out for years until they actually get into power and start doing it.
I mean, is that, with respect to you, I appreciate that isn't, there are other people who will make that point, but that isn't really good enough, is it? I mean, this is a party that has been shouting from the rooftops about the £28 billion pledge. I think in the last couple of weeks it was sort of downgraded to an ambition, a gold-plated ambition, I think were Starmer's words, or roughly in that ballpark. You heard what Ed Miliband had been saying as well. I mean, this is about stopping the end of the planet. I mean, if you can't find money for, according to Labour, if you can't find money for that, what can you find money for?
Well, you know, when I'm arguing for this policy on the doorstep, I don't tend to emphasise the planet, because I think that sounds a little bit big and abstract. I think we should talk about our kids' futures. You know, we want our kids to live in a safe world where there aren't wars over energy sources, where there aren't 300 million climate refugees. And I want our bills to go down right now and in the future. And the way you do that is by having clean, cheap, homegrown energy sources, and not the gas and the oil sources of energy that are disappearing off the planet right now. You know, we're using it up and it's getting more expensive. So, you know, those are the reasons why we should be doing this: creating jobs, cutting bills, and protecting our kids' future. And I hope that Labour's still going to be pursuing Great British Energy, which is the publicly owned energy company that will be investing in energy production, the National Wealth Fund, which would be investing in the clean energy jobs of the future, clean jobs of the future. You know, everything from hydrogen and gigafactories to protecting our steel industry. And of course, insulating people's homes, right? I mean, it's just bonkers that we're not insulating people's homes. That means our
So are you saying, Richard, sorry to interject, are you saying that Keir Starmer is going to insulate people's homes?
So the plan is to support people to insulate their homes, 19 million of them. Sorry, the lights in here, because this is a very green building that I'm in, the lights go on and off automatically, depending on whether we're moving or not.
Yeah, see, that's socialism running the energy company sort of reminder for us, isn't it? The lights go off, another 50p in the meter, or was it a lightning bolt from God, maybe?
It's a good illustration of it, isn't it? So home insulation is just the most obvious thing. We should have been doing it for decades. And instead we've just left it to people, which means that some people can afford to insulate their homes and some people can't. And some people, would like to, but they've got a private landlord who's refusing to do it, or indeed a social landlord who's refusing to do it. And Labour is very sensibly saying the government should support people to get their homes insulated, make it as cheap as possible to do that. That obviously is going to bring down bills, it's going to protect the country as a whole from how vulnerable we currently are to, Putin turning off the gas pipes, the gas taps. It's a very sensible policy, and of course it's going to create loads of jobs.
So we are going to somehow affect the climate by lagging our lofts?
I mean, it's not somehow, it's a very direct thing, right? You lag your loft.
But significantly enough to save the world. I mean, obviously, yes, your bill will be slightly cheaper. I'm aware of that. I think most of us are. If you've got no windows in your house, your bills are more expensive to heat it, of course. However, are we literally going to change the future of the environmental cycle by Mrs. Miggins in Acacia Avenue lagging her loft?
So I guess the short answer to that is yes, we all need to do our bit, but no, one person doesn't change the world by themselves. So on the one hand, we've all got to do our bit, and that will get our bills down, it will create green energy jobs, all that nice stuff. But on the other hand, we also need to have a government which is trying to be a world leader. And, you know, we did used to have that. Now we don't. I think under Keir Starmer we will. But you know what? This policy downgrade today, it is disappointing.
Isn't there a wider question here, though, Richard, about Keir Starmer, about what he stands for? I remember, you know, prior to the 97 election, I really knew what Tony Blair stood for. I was fully aware of what his thinking was. I genuinely and objectively can't work this out with Starmer. If he'd have stuck with the 28 billion, the Green Pledge, then maybe I'd have had a bit of a taster. But I just don't know what the man is about. Do you?
Well, you know what, Ian, you've perhaps picked the wrong person to talk about the 1997 election with, because I literally wrote a book about New Labour and 1997, and it's still available in the bookshops, and I'd really welcome anybody who wants to buy it. It's great for birthday presents and Christmas presents.
It's on my bookshelf, if that helps. So there you go.
But you were asking a very sensible question. Look, the thing is that in 97, maybe you knew what Tony Blair stood for, but actually the thing that he was being criticised for ahead of the 97 election was how incredibly cautious the policies on the pledge card, people might remember, they were relatively cautious policies. And Keir Starmer's doing something quite similar. I think that caution, when you're going ahead of an election and you're used to the Labour Party being absolutely slammed by a conservative biased minister, conservative biased media, is an understandable approach. The issue that I think Labour can eventually be concerned about kind of coming up against is that if you haven't come to those kinds of decisions about what you're going to do with the tough decisions ahead of an election, it's incredibly difficult to make those decisions when crises arise after an election. Now, it's very possible that all of these decisions have been made in the leader's office and they're just sort of, you know, being relatively quiet about them. And I don't think it's fair to say that there are no ambitious policies. You know, I'd look at, you know, the policy for sectoral bargaining, incredibly wonky sounding, but it's a really good thing, right? It's saying that in the social care industry, you know, all of these people work in social care, incredibly badly paid, really badly screwed over by their bosses and by the system. They're going to be able to come together and, as a single group of people, argue with their bosses about how much they should get paid. And that means they're going to be much stronger and they're going to be paid properly. Okay. You know, that's a really radical change. It's the kind of thing that they do in Europe very successfully. We haven't had it for a long time.
Yeah, I wonder with social care whether I mean, I think we'd all agree that the argument is much deeper and complex than just that, but I take the point. Listen, Richard, we hit the clock, sadly. We could have talked for much longer. Richard Power Sayeed, former Labour official with us here on the programme.